Link TV, connecting you to the world. Link TV is viewer supported. Watch more at linktv.org.
Link TV presents Mosaic World News from the Middle East. Here are today's top stories.
Tunisian revolution bears its first fruit with historic election. Activists in Morocco call for a boycott of parliamentary polls. And new ruler announces the liberation of Libya from Gaddafi. Mosaic, world news from the Middle East, begins now.
In Tunisia, the vote counting process for the Constituent Assembly is ongoing.
وقالت مصادر للجزيرة أن المؤشرات الأولية تفيد بتقدم حركة النهضة بحصولها على نحو 5.
Sources told Al Jazeera that according to preliminary indications, al-Nahda received nearly 35% of the votes, followed by the Congress Party for the Republic with nearly 15%, and the Democratic Forum for Labor and Liberties with 12%.
The independent list, Al-Arida Al-Sha'biyya, received nearly 10%, and the result is considered the first surprise in the Tunisian elections.
Here, Tunisians laid out their vision for the future, with the army vowing to protect it as they wait for the results once the ballots are sorted and counted. In the meantime, it seems that Tunisia's revolution has started to bear its first fruit.
أعتقد أن كافة المؤشرات تدل على نجاح
I think most indicators point to at least a relative success of the electoral process in terms of organization, sorting the ballots, and the election. Also in terms of receiving the voters and the discipline of the voters.
لم تعلم النتائج النهائية بعد، لكن الإرهاصات الأولية لم تخالف التوقعات. هنا
The final results have not yet been announced, but the initial outcome is as predicted. Here, one party is being granted a major victory by preliminary results, with a significant advance over the other parties. It is al-Nahda. Its leadership does not seem surprised by the large share of votes it received, but it is keeping its previously made promise that the country cannot be ruled by one party alone or a single movement. The question of alliances has started to sharply rise, even before the final results are announced. Everyone here is looking forward to the post-election phase, especially parties hoping the ballot box will benefit them.
للبحث على السبل الكفيلة بتأمين الاستقرار إلى تونس.
A national dialogue must be held between all groups to look into ways to ensure stability in Tunisia and to build a democratic system to secure a genuine transition.
On the Tunisian street, people are still feeling great joy over their historic accomplishment, while optimistically focusing on the future.
Thank God we passed the most difficult phase, which was the elections. This constitutes the foundation, and we are very hopeful.
Tunisia has men. May God protect them and protect the youth. May we see a bright Tunisia and a bright future.
The final results have still not been announced, and it is unknown who won and who failed, but it is certain that Tunisia has already won. It offered a different model and showed that democratic elections are possible in the Arab world. All they need is the downfall of tyranny. Mahmoud al-Bakali, Al Jazeera, Tunis. Moroccan security forces dispersed a massive rally demanding a boycott of the parliamentary elections, injuring several protesters. Similar protests took place in several cities, including Rabat, Casablanca, Fez, and Tangier, in response to a call by the February 20th movement, which vowed to continue their mobilization until their demands for change are achieved.
The growing number of participants in the February 20th movement, as reflected by the massive protests staged by tens of thousands of people, indicates the movement's success of reaching out to various groups, most notably workers, students, and the unemployed with college degrees.
الحركة التي غيرت من استراتيجيتها للظهور كتنظيم قوي أكدت خلال مسيرة.
During the Rabat rally, the movement, which changed its strategy to strengthen its position, reiterated that those who were betting on its failure have lost the bet, confirming they have returned stronger and more committed to their demands, which include building a democratic state as well as restoring dignity and social justice to the country.
The movement is still committed to achieving its demands, represented by forming a democratic constitution that will help guarantee a parliamentary monarchy in which the king serves as head of state but doesn't rule.
The protesters described how the state is dealing with the movement's demands as opportunistic and misleading. In addition, the February 20th movement described the elections and the political mobilization associated with them as a flagrant attempt to corner the movement's demands. The movement added that the elections are nothing more than a political game played by parties loyal to the state.
We condemn these types of political games, especially the elections, which aim to undermine the movement's demands for democracy and social justice in Morocco.
مسيرة الرباط التي انطلقت من حي شعبي وجابت العديد من الشوارع كانت ستنتهي.
The Rabat demonstration, which started in a neighborhood and marched through city streets, would have ended peacefully if it weren't for security forces that intervened to disperse the protesters as they arrived at the parliament headquarters. 3 protesters were injured and transported to the city's hospital.
We at the February 20th movement condemned the brutal intervention and quelling of the protesters. This action was not justified. The February 20th movement is peaceful and will remain as such until we achieve freedom and the movement's demands.
Despite the security intervention, the demonstration continued amid chants of slogans demanding change, freedom, dignity, and social justice.
During a massive popular ceremony in Benghazi's Tahrir, or Liberation Square, the National Transitional Council, the NTC, officially announced the liberation of Libya, marking an end to the 42-year rule of Colonel Muammar Gaddafi. NTC chief Mustafa Abdul Jalil announced that Islamic Sharia law will be the main source of legislation. He added that tolerance and renouncing violence and hatred are important factors for the success of the revolution.
Here, nothing is more important than the voices of the people. This is Benghazi, the birthplace of the Libyan revolution against Colonel Muammar Gaddafi. Today, the new Libyan authorities announced the full liberation of the country from the 42-year rule of Gaddafi's regime, rendering it a mere nightmare from the past. This is what the proud and jubilant Libyans are saying.
Lift your chin up high, as you are a free Libyan. O great Libyan people, with firm steps in God's trust, all praises to Him, we are embarking on a new phase, a post-liberation phase.
For the first time in 8 months, the sound of joy and national lyrics reverberated louder than the sound of gunfire, as smiles replaced the pain inflicted by the excessive violence of Gaddafi against the sons of Libya rising against him.
كفاح الليبيين ضد معمر القذافي.
The struggle of the Libyan people against Muammar Gaddafi have existed since the coup. But the revolutions were quelled. They were crushed inside army bases, in sports halls, across public squares, inside prisons as well as inside and outside Libya.
أو في الميادين العامة أو في السجون في الداخل وفي الخارج الليبيون لم يعلوا جهدا في الثورة.
Libyans did not spare any effort to rebel against Muammar Gaddafi and his regime, but the opportunity didn't come until this year.
إلى جانب عبد الجليل حضر احتفال التحرير أعضاء المجلس الوطني.
Along with Abdul Jalil, NTC members and heads of local councils across Libyan cities and regions, as well as commanders of the national army units and revolutionary brigades, attended the ceremony. In addition, tens of thousands of Libyans converged to Freedom Square to recite the independence song, or the national anthem of Free Libya.
هذه الثورة بدأت سلمية وللمطالبة بالحد الأدنى من الحقوق المشروعة ولكنها وجهت.
This revolution began as a peaceful one to demand our minimum legitimate rights, but it was faced with violence, excessive violence.
من ينصرنا بداية من مجلس التعاون الخليجي وجامعة الدول العربية.
God, all praise to Him, sent us support, starting with the Gulf Cooperation Council, the Arab League, the Islamic Cooperation Council, and ending with the EU and the UN.
The Libyan authorities called for tolerance, forgiveness, and reconciliation in order to ensure the success of the revolution and the success of the future Libya. With the announcement of the liberation, a new phase begins, which will not be any less difficult than the armed revolution. As Libyans mark an end of the Green Book era, their eyes are now focused on the new Libya, the Libya of law and order.
الحرب في ليبيا التي أعلنت نهايتها أمس تكشف مزيدا من أسرارها. في مدينة سرت عثرت.
The Libyan war, which was announced to be over yesterday, revealed more secrets. In the city of Sirte, Human Rights Watch, HRW, uncovered 53 bodies believed to be Gaddafi supporters. HRW believes that the victims were executed without a trial in a hotel in the city. The rights group urged the NTC to launch an immediate and transparent investigation into what seems to be a mass execution and to bring the perpetrators to justice. According to witnesses questioned by HRW, the area was under the control of anti-Gaddafi fighters from Misrata at the time of the incident.
أهلا بكم ونبدأ من سوريا حيث أكدت وزارة الخارجية الأمريكية أنه تم سحب السفير الأمريكي في سوريا روبرت فورد وذلك بسبب
The U.S. State Department confirmed it has pulled its ambassador to Syria, Robert Ford, due to new threats against his personal safety in Syria. State Department Deputy Spokesman Mark Toner says Ford's return depends on the security situation on the ground. Ford has numerously been attacked by Syrian regime loyalists while approaching protest sites or meeting with opposition members, which Damascus considers interference in its internal affairs.
Absolute rubbish.
تهديدات جدية لسلامته الشخصية في سوريا. هذا ما صرحته وزارة الخارجية الأمريكية.
The U.S. State Department stated that credible threats against his personal safety in Syria was the reason for calling its ambassador from Damascus. The U.S. State Department spokesman did not specify a time frame for the ambassador's return, but confirmed it depends on the security situation in Syria. Ambassador Robert Ford presented his credentials to Damascus in January 2011 after a 5-year absence of a U.S. ambassador from Damascus. But he quickly angered the Syrian regime for publicly visiting Syrian cities swept by the protest movement and violence, and for meeting with demonstrators and opposition members. This led Damascus to accuse him of fueling violence in the country.
The British ambassador did not go, nor did the German, Austrian, Swiss ambassadors, nor any others. This is a special case related to the American policy towards us, and especially this person's charisma, because he began interfering and making all citizens feel like he was insulting the Syrian street.
وهاجم محتجون موالون للرئيس السوري في حينها سفارة الولايات المتحدة.
At the time, protesters loyal to the Syrian president attacked the American embassy and burned the American flag. On September 6, 2011, Ford strongly attacked the Syrian regime on Facebook, condemning the pretexts used by Syrian authorities to crack down on protesters. He seemed to be supporting the opposition and opposing the regime.
وتجمع في نهاية أيلول سبتمبر موالون للرئيس بشار الأسد أمام مكتب معارض سوري.
At the end of September, President Bashar al-Assad's loyalists gathered in front of a Syrian opposition bureau in Damascus that Ford was visiting. They threw tomatoes and eggs at the U.S. embassy car, leading Washington to accuse the regime in Damascus of incitement against Ambassador Ford. The ambassador also led a group of ambassadors to the mourning ceremony of Ghiath Matar in Daraya. Matar was an activist who was arrested and tortured to death after giving flowers to members of the Syrian army. It seems his actions provoked Damascus.
The American story is that the U.S. is leading a very dangerous project, and according to well-known statements, they are done with Libya and now it's Syria's turn. This is very dangerous, and for this reason, we can say that the Syrian reaction has been minimal.
الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية ودول غربية أخرى دعت الأسد إلى التنحي بعد أن فقد شرعيته كرئيس لسوريا حسب تعبيرهم.
The U.S. and other Western countries have called on Assad to resign after losing his, quote, legitimacy as Syria's president. They tried to impose harsh sanctions on him at the Security Council, but China and Russia's interference prevented them from doing so. Pulling the U.S. ambassador from Damascus at this particular moment could mean other American measures are being planned against Bashar al-Assad's regime. Other ambassadors could also be later recalled under different pretexts. The situation in Syria presents the world with difficult challenges, between keeping quiet on the events in Syria or supporting the street demanding freedom, justice and democracy. Hayan Yaqub, BBC.
On the
ground, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights reported that 5 civilians were killed in Homs, in the center of the country, by the security forces' gunfire. The observatory said dozens of armored vehicles headed to the Baba Amr neighborhood in Homs and fired heavily. The center's reported soldiers are encircling a southern town near Daraa, which has been witnessing a strike for days.
Well, this as hundreds of Afghans have taken to the streets in the capital, Kabul, to voice opposition to any presence of US-led troops in Afghanistan beyond 2014. The demonstrators opposed any agreement that would allow Washington to set up permanent military bases in their country. They threatened to rise in revolt if any such agreement is reached, saying that foreign forces will cause even more unrest. Washington has promised to withdraw all combat forces from Afghanistan in 3 years' time. However, it has been locked in tricky negotiations with Kabul over a strategic partnership beyond that date. Afghans are suspicious of the United States' motives and believe it's putting down long-term roots at some military bases. On to Yemen now, where tens of thousands of anti-regime protesters have taken to the streets across the country, shouting slogans against the US and its allies. Most Yemenis blame the US and its allies, including Saudi Arabia, for trying to put an end to their popular revolution. Demonstrators from all walks of life in several cities have come out calling for an end to what they call massacre against them. Dozens of people have been killed in the past 3 days alone by forces loyal to embattled ruler Ali Abdullah Saleh. Yemenis have been holding rallies since their revolution began in mid-February. It was triggered by the revolutions in Tunisia and Egypt. You're with Press TV's World News. In Turkey, rescue workers are searching for survivors of a powerful quake that killed hundreds in the country's southeast. Now, the 7.2 magnitude quake has killed some 270 people and left over 1,000 others injured. The death toll is expected to rise as dozens remain trapped under hills of debris. The worst hit in Sunday's tremor is the city of Artish, where about 80 multi-story buildings collapsed, followed by the bustling city of Van. Over 1,000 rescue teams from 38 provinces have been dispatched to the region, with troops assisting search and rescue efforts. Iran has also offered its assistance, sending rescue workers as well as food and medical supplies to the quake-stricken country. Now, an Iranian American accused of plotting to assassinate the Saudi ambassador to Washington is to appear before the New York federal court. Before we move on with this report, breaking news, we're hearing that the man at the center of the U.S. anti-Iran allegation has pleaded not guilty now in that court. More in this report.
Mansour Erbabsi, a naturalized American citizen who also holds an Iranian passport, was arrested last month at New York's John F. Kennedy International Airport. The 56-year-old dealer of used cars has been accused of attempting to get Mexican gangsters to kill Saudi Arabia's ambassador in Washington. Erbabsi's lawyer has already said his client will plead not guilty to the charges against him. The United States claims that Erbabsi has links with Iran's Islamic Revolution Guards Corps. But Iranian authorities have strongly rejected the allegation, saying the U.S. has failed to substantiate its claims with any proof. They say comments by Mansour Erbabsi, the man at the center of the assassination plot, cannot be used as evidence due to his background. The suspect is said to be a drug addict who fled Iran 30 years ago. According to some friends in his community, Erbabsier smoked marijuana, drank alcohol, and had a reputation for being disorganized and absent-minded. He was arrested and charged with car theft back in 2001 in Texas. Meanwhile, Iran's intelligence minister Haydar Moslehi says even the weakest intelligence agencies in the world would not hire a man with such a background and sign him to an operation on U.S. soil. Erbabsier acquired U.S. citizenship 8 months ago, after living in the country for some 3 decades. Moslehi says Erbabsier cooperated with American intelligence agencies in return for his residency permit. The alleged terror plot has raised some eyebrows among experts, including former U.S. intelligence officials.
We've seen unfold makes no sense in terms of Iran's national security strategy. There's no benefit, there's no payoff from them pursuing this kind of hit against al-Jubair, and it runs contrary to their entire national security strategies.
I did talk to one of my inside guys today, and he is saying that he thinks the same thing. You know why? Because he can't find any real information, and he's got a clearance. So that tells him that there's something going on that's extraordinary by the fact that he's an inside, investigator, knows what's going on, and yet, and I'm going to quote here, there's nothing on this within the DOJ beyond what they've talked about publicly, which means to him there's something very wrong with it.
Many political observers believe that the latest terror allegations against Iran are part of efforts by Washington and its allies to isolate the country. Iran says such plots are doomed to failure, just like the schemes hatched against the country in the past 3 decades.
از این توطئه‌ها مرتب پی در پی از سوی آنها انجام میگیرد، بیفایده، بی اثر. میگن میخواهیم ایران رو منزوی کنیم، خودشون منزوی شدن.
The IDF is reportedly finalizing a list of goodwill gestures to the Palestinian Authority in an attempt to bolster the position of PA Chairman Mahmoud Abbas following last week's prisoner exchange deal with Hamas. The list, which will be presented to the government next month, includes a reduction in IDF operations inside Palestinian cities and towns in the territory defined as Area A, which is under full Palestinian control. One of the IDF's proposals relates to the second stage of the Shalit deal, in which Israel is slated to release 550 additional prisoners of its own choosing. While the list has yet to be concluded, the Army is recommending that the freed detainees be mostly low-level terrorists affiliated with Abbas's Fatah faction. The Army is also proposing that Israel free more prisoners in addition to the stated number as a gesture in honor of the upcoming Muslim holiday of Eid al-Adha, which begins in 2 weeks' time. Government ministers are expected to oppose these moves, arguing that Abbas should be punished, not rewarded for his unilateral attempt at statehood. And joining me now in the studio to discuss recent developments within the Palestinian Authority is Arab affairs expert Wadea Abu Nasser. Wadea, thanks for coming in this evening.
Good evening.
All right, what's the mood like, the atmosphere like in the West Bank following the Gilad Shalit exchange deal?
Well, in the first days, it was, of course, a kind of happiness for the release of hundreds of prisoners. But now, slowly, things are calming down, and some tension is back between Fatah and Hamas, especially due to mutual trade of accusations. If the deal was okay or not, people have different opinions on it.
Of course, this deal was made between Israel and Hamas, and Abbas is with the Fatah faction, sort of rivals. Has this weakened his standing at all in the community?
Indeed. No doubt that even some people of close associates of Abbas believe that it was a kind of unholy alliance between Netanyahu and Hamas against Abbas. Especially many of them, they talk about the timing of the deal. And many of them are convinced that the deal was already ready about 2 years ago, but the two sides decided to execute it now, mainly to damage Abbas' image.
Now, the IDF is going to be proposing within a month or so some goodwill gestures that are designed to sort of give more substance and shore up Abbas's standing in the Palestinian community. Will it have the desired effect?
Well, first, it's not clear whether the Israeli political echelon would back it. We just heard that Minister Lieberman have been critical in recent hours to President Abbas, arguing that anybody but not Abbas is better than Abbas. So first, it's not clear. Second, even if this will happen, I don't believe that talking much about it in public would really help Abbas. I believe that Abbas needs really gestures on the ground rather than talks in the media.
Now, Mahmoud Abbas has talked about possibly calling some elections in the Palestinian Authority within the next 3 or 4 months. It's no secret he's tired. He wants to step aside. Are there any names being bandied about as possible successors?
Well, first of all, I'm not sure that there will be elections, especially because reconciliations is not advancing much between Fatah and Hamas. Secondly, I'm not sure that really Abbas wants to step down, and even if he wants to step down, many of his entourage would not allow him. They would like to keep him on post, especially because the rivals are too many and they hate each other more than they hate him. If to talk about potential successors, some people talk about imprisoned Marwan Barghouti, others talk about Jibril Rajoub, Fatah Central Committee member, but I do believe that the chances for these two are not high.
The views expressed on Mosaic are from contributing broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible by grants from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, the Wincoat Foundation, the Firedoll Foundation, and by support of viewers like you. Thank you. Watch Mosaic World News online. Stay up to date with breaking news, read our blog, get transcripts of past shows, and more at linktv.org/mosaic.
This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. network dedicated to global and national news, uncompromising documentaries, and diverse cultural programs. Programs which connect you to the world.